Now, let me get into why I never spoke on her. I never spoke on Remy because I felt like it wasn't even nothing to be spoken about. Me and you not beefing. I'm not beefing with you over a dude. He not going back and forth with both of us. He chose me and left that situation. So now we done posted the video of us hitting we fucking working out together. We got the media workout together. He made a freestyle about me, and then
what was supposed to be a simple relationship flex turned into a moment that exposed way more than intended. Because when Claressa Shields sat down on The Breakfast Club, she thought she was showing the world just how solid her situation with Papoose really is. But instead, she ended up putting his business out there in a way that had people raising eyebrows, and not in a good way. And what makes this even crazier is that his reaction afterward, it didn't just confirm the tension, it made things look even worse. By the end of the weekend, what started as bragging turned into damage control, and people couldn't stop watching it unfold. Now, if you've been paying attention to this situation, you already know this isn't the first time things have felt a little off. There's been a pattern building here, and every time it looks like things are being cleared up, somehow they end up getting even more confusing. But this particular moment, this one hit differently. Because instead of just rumors or speculation, this time the details came straight from her, and that's what made it so revealing. Sometimes people don't realize that when they're trying to prove something too hard, they end up exposing the exact thing they're trying to hide, and that's exactly what happened here. So boom, Claressa is back on The Breakfast Club again, and at this point, people are already familiar with how these interviews tend to go. There's always a lot of confidence, a lot of energy, and a lot of talking about her relationship with Papoose. And once again, she leans into it, talking about what they have, how things are going, and why it's something she's proud of. But then, she tells a story that completely shifts the tone of the conversation. She starts talking about a birthday party she threw for him earlier in the month, and she describes this little game she set up where he had to choose between two options, one being $1,000 and the other being $10,000. He ends up picking the $1,000, only to later find out he could have had 10 times that amount. And according to her, his reaction wasn't lighthearted or playful. She made it very clear he was upset. Not just a little disappointed, but actually mad. And in that moment, what was supposed to sound like a funny or entertaining story ended up revealing something else entirely. Because people immediately started asking themselves, why would someone who supposedly does so much financially be that pressed over $10,000? And this is where things really started to unravel. Charlemagne steps in and asks a very straightforward question. If you put stories like that out there, don't you think people are going to assume he's with you for the money? Now, that question alone already puts pressure on the situation, but her response, that's what really made people stop and think. Because instead of brushing it off or downplaying it, she immediately goes into defense mode. She starts listing everything he supposedly does for her. He pays her mortgage, he covers her expenses, he handles flights, he takes care of all these different things. Now, in her mind, she was probably trying to flip the narrative and show that he's actually the provider. But the problem is, it didn't land that way. Instead, it created an even bigger contradiction, because now people are looking at the situation like, if he's doing all of that, then why is he upset over $10,000? Why does that even matter in the first place? And that's when people started realizing this isn't adding up. And this is where you start to see the bigger pattern forming. Because this isn't just about one story or one interview. It's about the consistent need to explain, defend, and reinforce the relationship publicly. Every time there's a question, there's a detailed answer. Every time there's doubt, there's another list of reasons why everything is perfect. But here's the thing. When something is truly solid, it doesn't require that much explanation. It just is. And the more someone feels the need to convince the world, the more people start wondering who they're really trying to convince. And then, as if that wasn't enough, she brings up Layla Ali again. And this is where people really started to question things, because it felt unnecessary. There was no real reason to go back there, especially considering that situation had already been addressed before. But instead of letting it go, she revisits it. And in doing so, it comes across less like confidence and more like something she hasn't fully moved past. And when someone keeps circling back to the same issue, it usually means there's something deeper there that hasn't been resolved. But if the interview raised questions, what happened afterward added even more fuel to the fire. Because when footage surfaced of them leaving the building together, people immediately noticed something was off. They weren't walking like a couple. There was no closeness, no connection, just distance. He was walking ahead, creating space between them, not even reaching back or checking on her. And she was visibly reacting, side-eyeing him as they moved. And it's moments like that where body language says everything that words try to hide. You can say whatever you want in an interview, but real energy, that's hard to fake. Now this is where things take another turn. Just a couple of days later, Remy Ma shows up at Cardi B's sold-out concert in New York. She's posting, enjoying herself, being visible, and everything seems normal on her end. But then suddenly, Papoose posts from that same concert, same place, same time. And instantly, people start connecting the dots, because now it's not just about what was said, it's about what's being shown. And whether it was intentional or not, the timing spoke volumes. Because after everything that had just happened, that post felt like a statement. It felt calculated, and people couldn't ignore it. And that's when things really started spiraling. Because instead of staying quiet, Claressa jumps into DMs, responding to people, trying to explain what's going on. She's saying it's a repost, trying to downplay it, but by that point, the damage is already done. Because even if it was a repost, people are asking, why post that at all? Why put yourself in that position knowing how it looks? And that's what made it feel like a response, not just to the situation, but to her. At the end of the day, this whole situation keeps repeating the same cycle. There's the public boasting, the strong statements, the confidence, and then there's an action that contradicts it all. And every time that happens, it chips away at the image being presented, because consistency is what makes something believable. And when the words and actions don't match, people notice. And let's not forget the one detail that keeps coming up. Separated is not divorced. Until that situation is fully resolved, everything else sits in a gray area. And trying to present it as something solid while it's still uncertain, that's where things start to fall apart. But now I want to hear from you. What do you think is really going on here? Is this just a misunderstanding that keeps getting blown up? Or is there more happening behind the scenes than we're being told? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you want more breakdowns like this, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because trust me, this situation is far from over.